Jake Morrison stared out the window of the transport ship as Nexus Station came into view. The massive structure looked like a metal city floating in space. Hundreds of lights blinked across its surface, and ships moved around it like tiny insects. Jake had never seen anything so big before. First time seeing the station? Asked the pilot, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. Most humans get excited when they see it. Jake nodded. It's huge. How many people live there? About 50,000 from different worlds, the pilot said. You're going to be the second human on the whole station. Jake felt his stomach tighten. Back on Earth, he had been just another soldier who got into too much trouble. The Terran Defense Force had been ready to kick him out after he accidentally destroyed half a training building during a weapons test. He had been trying to see how much power the new rifle could handle. The answer was more than the building. Could take Dot, but then something strange happened. Instead of being punished, he got orders to report to this station. The paperwork said he was being transferred to a special project. Nobody would tell him what kind of project docked the transport ship. Docked with a loud clang. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the pilot through the airlock. The station's air smelled different from Earth air. It was cleaner, but had a metallic taste. Lieutenant Morrison? A woman's voice called out. Jake turned to see a tall woman with short brown hair walking toward him. She wore a white lab coat over a blue uniform. I'm Dr. Zara Kelvin. I've been waiting for you. You're the other human, Jake said. That's right. I'm the lead engineer on this project. Come on, I'll show you around and explain why you're here. They walked through corridors filled with aliens Jake had never seen before. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of what looked like living crystal. A few looked almost human, except for their green skin or extra eyes. This is the Weapons Research Center for the entire galaxy, Dr. Kelvin explained as they walked. Every major species sends their best scientists here to develop new weapons and defense systems. And you need me because? Dr. Kelvin smiled. Because every other species we've tried, as testers, has been too careful. They follow safety rules. They test weapons at low power. They stop the moment something looks dangerous. They entered a large room filled with workbenches and strange machines. Several aliens looked up when they entered. Jake noticed that a few of them stepped back when they saw him. Team, this is our new tester, Dr. Kelvin announced. Jake Morrison, from Earth. A tall insect-like alien with multiple eyes approached them. I am Vexstar, he said in a buzzing voice. I have heard stories about human testing methods. Are they true? What stories? Jake asked. That humans ignore safety protocols. That they push weapons beyond their limits. That they continue testing, even when equipment starts to fail. Jake shrugged. If you want to know what something can really do, you have to test it properly. Vexstar's eyes went wide. He made a sound like a whistle and took another step back. Don't mind him, said another voice. Jake turned to see a being that looked like it was made of purple crystal. I am Grom of the Shard Collective. We have been waiting for someone who can truly test our creations. What's wrong with the way you test them now? Jake asked Dr. Kelvin. Led him to a computer terminal. Look at this. She pulled up a file showing test results. This plasma rifle was designed to fire at up to 500 terajoules, but we've only tested it at 50 terajoules. Why? Because that's the safe limit according to our Catherian testers, Grom explained. They refuse to go higher. And our Andromedian testers won't fire anything above 200 terajoules, Vexstar added. They say it's too dangerous. Jake looked at the numbers on the screen. So you built a weapon that can handle 500, but you don't know if it actually works at 500. Exactly, Dr. Kelvin said. We have thousands of weapons that have never been tested at their designed capacity. We need someone who will actually push them to their limits. Someone who won't faint at the first sign of danger, Grom added at that moment. A new voice spoke from behind them. And that someone is apparently a human who destroyed an entire training facility. Jake turned to see a woman in a military uniform. She had silver hair and cold blue eyes. Everything about her said she was used to being in charge. Commander Lyra Thorne, she said, not offering to shake hands. I'm the military liaison for this project. I've read your file, Morrison. 15 safety violations in 2 years. 3 destroyed testing ranges. And 1 completely obliterated building. I was trying to find the rifle's maximum output, Jake said, by firing it until it exploded. It didn't explode. It just overheated and caught fire. The building exploded. Commander Thorne stared at him for a long moment. The aliens think you're either brilliant or completely insane. What do you think? I think you're exactly what we need. But I also think you're going to give me headaches. Dr. Kelvin stepped between them. Why don't we show Jake the testing ranges? He can get familiar with the equipment before we start. They walked through several more corridors until they reached a massive chamber. The walls were covered with some kind of metal that seemed to absorb light. Targets of different sizes were positioned around the room. This is Testing Range Alpha, Dr. Kelvin explained. It's designed to handle weapons up to 1,000 terajoules. The walls can absorb almost any kind of energy. Almost? Jake asked. Well, we've never actually tested them at full capacity, Vextar admitted. No one has been willing to fire weapons that powerful. Jake walked over to a rack of weapons. They all looked different from Earth weapons, but he could tell what most of them were supposed to do. Rifles, pistols, something that looked like a cannon. When do we start? He asked. Tomorrow morning, Dr. Kelvin said. We'll start with something simple. A basic plasma rifle, rated for 200 terajoules. What's the safety limit? 50 terajoules. Jake picked up the rifle and checked its power settings. The maximum setting was labeled clearly. So we'll test it at 200? Dr. Kelvin, Vextar, and Grom all looked at each other. Commander Thorne crossed her arms and waited. We usually start at 10 terajoules, Vextar said quietly. And work our way up slowly, Grom added. Very slowly, Vextar emphasized. Jake looked at the weapon in his hands, then at the faces around him. These aliens had built weapons they were afraid to use. They had created things they were too scared to test properly. They needed someone who wasn't afraid to find out what their creations could really do. Tomorrow we start at 200, Jake said, and we'll work our way up from there. Vextar made that whistling sound again. Grom's crystal body flickered like a dying light. Even Commander Thorne looked a little pale. But Dr. Kelvin smiled. I knew we picked the right human. Jake looked around the testing range one more time. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Jake woke up early the next morning. He had spent the night reading about the different alien species on the station. The Catherians were bug-like creatures who valued safety above everything else. The Shard Collective were crystal beings who thought slowly and carefully about every decision. The Andromedians were the most human-like, but they followed rules so strictly that they rarely took risks. All of them had one thing in common. They were all terrified of breaking things. Jake ate breakfast in the station's cafeteria. The food was strange but tasty. Several aliens stared at him while he ate. He could hear them whispering to each other in their own languages. Word had already spread that the human tester was different. Dr. Kelvin found him finishing his coffee. Ready for your first day? I've been ready since I got here, Jake said. They walked to testing range Alpha. The observation deck was more crowded than yesterday. Jake counted at least 20 aliens watching from behind the safety barrier. Some of them had recording devices. News. Travels fast, Dr. Kelvin said. Everyone wants to see what the human will do. Vextar was waiting by the weapon rack. He looked nervous. His multiple eyes kept darting between Jake and the plasma rifle. This is the PX-400, Vextar explained. It is designed for personal defense. Maximum rated output is 200 terajoules. Please remember that we usually test at 50 terajoules maximum. Jake picked up the rifle. It was heavier than Earth weapons, but felt good in his hands. The power display showed settings from 10 terajoules all the way up to 250. I thought you said maximum was 200, Jake said. That is the safe maximum, Vextar replied. The weapon can technically go higher, but we do not recommend it. What happens if it goes higher? We do not know. No one has ever tried. Jake looked at the targets downrange. They were made of different materials to test different types of damage. What's the strongest target? The reinforced metal plate, Grom said. It can withstand up to 300 terajoules before melting. Jake nodded and walked to the firing position. He set the rifle to 200 terajoules and aimed at the metal plate. The weapon hummed as it charged up. Wait, Vextar called out. Should we not start at 50 terajoules? Why? Jake asked. You want to know if it works at 200, right? He pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt shot out in a bright blue stream. It hit the target and sent sparks flying everywhere. The metal plate glowed red hot, but didn't break. Excellent, Grom said. The weapon performs as designed. That's it. Jake asked, That's the test? Well, yes. We have confirmed it works at the rated power level. Jake looked at the power setting. But what about 250? That is not recommended, Vextar said quickly. But it's possible? Technically, yes, but the safety protocols clearly state that we should not exceed the rated maximum. Jake turned the power setting up to 250. Several aliens in the observation deck started making worried sounds. Perhaps we should discuss this first, Ground suggested. Jake fired again. This time the plasma bolt was brighter and made a louder sound. The metal target turned white-hot and started to bend. Interesting, Dr. Kelvin said, taking notes. The weapon handles the overload well. This is not following proper testing procedure. Vextar protested. Jake turned to look at him. What's the highest setting on this thing? The display goes up to 300 terajoules, but that is purely theoretical. No one would ever use that setting. Why not? Because it would be dangerous. Jake shrugged and turned the power all the way up. The weapon's hum became a high-pitched whine. Stop, Vextar shouted. That is far too dangerous. Only one way to find out, Jake said and fired. The plasma bolt that shot out was blindingly bright. It hit the metal target and went straight through it. The target melted and fell to the floor in a puddle of liquid metal. The bolt continued and hit the wall behind it, leaving a smoking crater. Half the aliens in the observation deck made sounds of panic. Vextar fell over backward. Ground's crystal body went completely dark. Did he just faint? Jake asked. Catherians do that when they're extremely stressed, Dr. Kelvin explained. She was writing notes rapidly. This is incredible data. The weapon performed far beyond its rated capacity. But what about the safety protocols? One of the other aliens called out. What about them? Jake asked. The weapon worked perfectly. It didn't explode or catch fire or anything. But you could have been hurt, but I wasn't. Commander Thorne's voice came over the communication system from the observation deck. Morrison, that was completely reckless. Did it work? That's not the point. Actually, that is the point, Dr. Kelvin said. We just learned that the PX-400 can handle 50% more power than its rated maximum. This is exactly the kind of data we need. Jake looked at the melted remains of the target. What's next? Next? Vextar had recovered enough to sit up. You want to test another weapon? That's why I'm here, right? Dr. Kelvin smiled. Bring out the heavy plasma cannon. The aliens in the observation deck started making worried sounds again. Two of them left the room entirely. The heavy plasma cannon was much bigger than the rifle. It needed to be mounted on a stand to fire. According to the specifications, it was rated for 500 terajoules. This weapon is designed for ship-to-ship combat, Grom explained. It has never been tested at full power. What's the usual test setting? Jake asked. 100 terajoules. Jake looked at the cannon's power controls. The maximum setting was 700 terajoules. Well, that's not going to be enough. Enough for what? To really test it. Jake set the power to 500 terajoules. The cannon made a deep humming sound as it charged up. He aimed at the heaviest target in the range, a block of reinforced armor plating. This is madness, Vextar whispered. Jake fired. The plasma bolt was as thick as his arm and bright as a small sun. It hit the armor plating and vaporized it instantly. The bolt continued and hit the wall, leaving a crater 3 feet deep. Holy stars, someone in the observation deck said. Now we're getting somewhere, Jake said. He turned the power up to 600 terajoules. Stop! Several aliens shouted at once. The weapon might overload. Vextar protested. Only one way to find out. Jake fired again. This time the plasma bolt was even brighter and made a sound like thunder. It completely destroyed the largest target and left an even bigger crater in the wall. System status shows all green, Dr. Kelvin reported. The weapon is handling the overload perfectly. 700? Jake asked. No, Vextar shouted. Yes. Dr. Kelvin said at the same time. Jake turned the power to maximum and fired one more time. The blast was so bright that the observation deck's windows automatically darkened. The sound was like a small explosion. When the light faded, there was a hole in the wall, large enough to walk through. The weapon is still functional, Dr. Kelvin announced. All systems normal. Jake looked at the cannon. It was warm, but not overheated. No smoke, no sparks, no damage. This thing could probably handle even more power. More power. Vextar's voice cracked. With some modifications to the power coupling, we could probably push it to 1,000 terajoules, Jake said. Ground's crystal body flickered again. 1,000 terajoules? Maybe more. 3 more aliens left the observation deck. Vextar was sitting on the floor with his head in his hands. Even Commander Thorne looked shaken. But Dr. Kelvin was smiling. Jake, I think this is going to be a very productive partnership. Jake looked at the hole in the wall, then at the row of weapons still waiting to be tested. What's next? The experimental beam array, Dr. Kelvin said. It's rated for 2,000 terajoules. And what's the usual test setting? We've never tested it at all. It was considered too dangerous. Jake grinned. Perfect. In the observation deck, several more aliens quietly left the room. The few who remained were either too scared to move or too fascinated to look away. Word was already spreading through. The station. The human tester didn't just ignore safety protocols. He seemed to think they were suggestions. And somehow, everything he tested worked better than anyone had expected. Jake Morrison was going to change everything. 3 weeks had passed since Jake started testing weapons. Word had spread throughout the entire station. Aliens from different research teams were now bringing their own weapons to see what the human would do with them. Jake had tested everything from handheld energy pistols to massive ship cannons. Every single weapon had performed far beyond its rated capacity. Some had worked so well that the research teams had to completely rewrite their specifications. The betting pool is up to 5,000 credits, Dr. Kelvin told him as they walked to the testing range. They're betting on whether you'll survive today's test. What are the odds? 3-1 against you. Jake laughed. I should place a bet on myself. You can't. You're the one being bet on. They entered the testing range to find it more crowded than ever. The observation deck was packed with aliens. Some were from other research teams. Others were just curious station workers who had heard the stories. Today's test is special, Dr. Kelvin explained. We're not testing a weapon. We're testing a defensive system. She led him to a large device that looked like a metal ring standing on end. This is the Guardian Shield Generator. It creates an energy barrier that can stop almost any attack. How? Does it work? It generates a field of charged particles that absorb incoming energy. The field can handle up to 800 terajoules before it fails. Jake walked around the device. And you want me to test it how? We shoot at it with various weapons while it's active. We start with low-power shots and work our way up. What's the highest power you've tested it at? 200 terajoules. That's the safe limit. Jake looked at the weapon rack. The heavy plasma cannon was already set up, along with several other high-powered weapons. So we'll test it at 800? Eventually. We usually increase the power slowly to make sure. The shield doesn't fail suddenly. But if it's rated for 800, it should handle 800, right? In theory, yes. But we've never actually tested it at that level. Jake activated the shield generator. A shimmering blue barrier appeared in the ring. It looked like water standing up in the air. Beautiful, Ground said. The field is stable and strong. Jake picked up the plasma cannon and set it to 800 terajoules. Several aliens in the observation deck started making worried sounds. Perhaps we should start lower, Vextar suggested. He had gotten used to Jake's testing methods, but still got nervous. Why? We want to know if it works at 800, right? Jake fired the cannon. The bright plasma bolt hit the shield and stopped completely. The barrier flashed, but held firm. Excellent, Dr. Kelvin said. The shield is performing perfectly. What happens if I shoot it with more power? The field should fail, and the shot should go through. Jake turned the cannon up to 1,000 terajoules. Let's find out, he fired again. This time the plasma bolt was brighter and more powerful. It hit the shield and stopped. The barrier flashed brighter but didn't fail. That's impossible, Vextar said. The shield can't handle that much power. But it just did, Jake pointed out. The field readings are off the charts, Dr. Kelvin said, checking her instruments. It's absorbing more energy than it should be able to. Jake had an idea. What if? We're thinking about this wrong. What do you mean? What if instead of trying to break the shield, we use it as a weapon? A weapon? It's a defensive system, but it absorbs energy, right? What happens to that energy? Dr. Kelvin checked her. Readings. It's stored in the field generator's power cells. So the more you shoot at it, the more energy it stores? Well, yes, but the cells have a limited capacity. If they get too full, the system should shut down automatically. Jake smiled. What if we don't let it shut down? That would be extremely dangerous. The excess energy has to go somewhere. Exactly. Jake went to the shield generator's control panel. He found the safety shutdown system and disabled it. Warning lights started flashing. What are you doing? Vextar asked. Making it stronger. Jake fired the cannon at the shield again, this time at maximum power. The shield absorbed the energy and glowed brighter. Then he fired again, and again. The power cells are at 150% capacity, Dr. Kelvin reported. The system is trying to shut down. But it can't because you disabled the safety system, Commander Thorne said over the communication system. "Morrison, this is incredibly reckless." "Watch this," Jake said. He went to the control panel and reversed the field polarity. Instead of absorbing energy, the shield started releasing it. The barrier changed from blue to bright white. "The field is now projecting energy outward," Dr. Kelvin said. "It's become a weapon." Jake aimed the reversed shield at one of the heavy target blocks. The energy beam that shot out was twice as powerful as the plasma cannon. It vaporized the target instantly. "By the stars," Grom whispered. "You've turned a defensive system into an offensive weapon. And it's more powerful than anything we've ever built," Dr. Kelvin added. The aliens in the observation deck were silent. They had just watched a human turn their most advanced defensive system into a devastating weapon in less than 10 minutes. "What else can we modify?" Jake asked. Dr. Kelvin looked at her notes. "There's the mining laser array. It's designed to cut through asteroids. Bring it out." The mining laser was a large device with multiple focusing lenses. It was designed to fire a continuous beam that could slowly cut through rock. "The beam is rated for sustained operation at 300 terajoules," Vextar explained. "It can cut through solid rock in about 30 minutes. Jake looked at the focusing array. "What if we concentrated all the power into a single pulse instead of a continuous beam?" "That's not how it's designed to work. But could it work that way?" "I suppose it's possible, but the focusing array might not be able to handle the concentrated energy." Jake started adjusting the settings. Instead of a continuous beam, he programmed the laser to fire all its energy in a single burst. The power reading climbed to over 1,500 terajoules. "This is madness," Vextar said. "The lenses will shatter." "Maybe. Or maybe they'll focus all that energy into the most powerful cutting beam ever created." Jake aimed the modified laser at the thickest armor plate in the range. The plate was designed to withstand multiple hits from ship weapons. "Ready?" he asked. "No," several aliens said at once. Jake fired. The laser beam lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was blindingly bright. When the light faded, the armor plate was gone. Not melted or destroyed, but completely vaporized. "The focusing array is intact," Dr. Kelvin reported. "All lenses are undamaged. So we've just created a precision weapon that can cut through anything," Jake said. "Including ship hulls," Commander Thorne added. "This could revolutionize space combat." Jake looked around the testing range. In just one day, he had turned a defensive shield into an energy weapon and a mining tool into a precision military laser. The aliens were staring at him like he was some kind of magician. "What's next?" he asked. "Actually," Dr. Kelvin said, "we have visitors coming tomorrow. A group of Andromedian military officials want to see what we've been doing. Are they friendly visitors? I'm not sure. They're concerned about the reports they've been receiving." "What kind of reports?" "Reports about dangerous human activities. They think you might be creating weapons that are too powerful." Jake looked at the hole where the armor plate used to be. "Too powerful for what?" "Too powerful for the galaxy to handle safely. But they work perfectly." "That's exactly what they're worried about." Jake thought about this. He had been so focused on finding out what the weapons could do that he hadn't thought about what other people might do with them. "Should I tone it down for the demonstration?" Dr. Kelvin smiled. "Jake, I don't think you're capable of toning anything down." "Fair point." As they left the testing range, Jake noticed that the aliens in the observation deck were still talking excitedly about what they had seen. Some of them were already making plans to modify their own weapons based on his methods. Word was spreading beyond the station now. Other research facilities were requesting copies of the test data. Military commanders were asking about the new weapons. Scientists were wondering what other defensive systems could be turned into offensive weapons. Jake. Morrison had started a revolution in weapons development, and tomorrow he would find out if the galaxy was ready for it. Admiral King Roberts arrived at Nexus Station with a full military escort. His ship, the Andromedian cruiser Vigilant, was twice the size of most vessels that docked at the station. Jake watched it approach through the observation windows of the main docking bay. "He's not happy," Dr. Kelvin said, standing next to him. "The reports from our testing have reached the highest levels of the Andromedian military." "What kind of reports?" "Reports about weapons that can vaporize armor plating in seconds. Reports about defensive systems being turned into offensive weapons. Reports about a human who ignores every safety protocol ever written." Jake shrugged. "The weapons work, don't they?" "That's exactly the problem. They work too well." Admiral Roberts was a tall man with gray hair and the kind of face that never smiled. He wore a dark blue uniform covered with medals and insignia. When he stepped off his ship, 20 armed soldiers followed him. "That's a lot of security for a research station," Jake said. "He's not just here to observe," Commander Thorne explained. "He's here to decide whether your testing methods are a threat to galactic security." The meeting took place in the station's main conference room. Admiral Roberts sat at one end of the table, surrounded by his officers. Dr. Kelvin sat at the other end with Jake, Vextar, and Grom. "I've read the reports," Admiral Roberts began. "In 3 weeks, you've created weapons that are more powerful than anything in the Andromedian arsenal. That concerns me." "Why?" Jake asked. "Isn't better weapons a good thing?" "Not if they're so powerful that they destabilize the balance of power in the galaxy. Wars have been fought over less." Dr. Kelvin leaned forward. "Admiral, these weapons were designed by a coalition of species. They're not meant to give any one group an advantage. But they do give an advantage to whoever is willing to use them at full power. And apparently, only humans are willing to do that. So you want us to stop testing them?" "I want you to test them responsibly, within safe parameters." Jake looked around the table. "But safe parameters don't tell you what the weapons can really do. Perhaps there are some things we're not meant to know." "That's not how science works," Dr. Kelvin said. "If we don't test these weapons properly, we'll never know their true capabilities." Admiral Roberts was quiet for a moment. "Very well. I'll make you a deal. I want to see one final demonstration. Your most advanced prototype. If Lieutenant Morrison can test it without causing a catastrophe, I'll recommend that the project continue. And if something goes wrong, then I'll recommend that all human personnel be removed from weapons research permanently." Dr. Kelvin and Jake looked at each other. "What weapon did you have in mind?" she asked. "Project Phoenix." The room went silent. Even Vextar, who had gotten used to Jake's testing methods, made a worried sound. "Project Phoenix isn't ready for testing," Dr. Kelvin said. "We're still running simulations." "What's Project Phoenix?" Jake asked. "A planet-cracking weapon," Admiral Roberts said, "designed to be the ultimate deterrent. Something so powerful that its mere existence would prevent wars." "How powerful?" "Theoretically, it could destroy a planet. But it's never been tested because every simulation suggests it might be too dangerous to use." Jake felt a familiar excitement. "Too dangerous how?" "The weapon draws power from quantum fluctuations in space-time itself," Dr. Kelvin explained. "In theory, it could have no upper limit. It might keep getting stronger until it destroys everything around it. Or it might create a chain reaction that affects entire star systems," Admiral Roberts added. "But you don't know for sure because you've never tested it." "Exactly." Jake looked around the table. "So you built the ultimate weapon, but you're too scared to find out if it works." "We're too responsible to risk destroying half the galaxy," Admiral Roberts said. "But what if it doesn't destroy half the galaxy? What if it works exactly as designed?" And what if it doesn't? Jake thought about this. It was the biggest risk he had ever been asked to take, but it was also the most important test. If Project Phoenix worked, it could prevent wars. If it didn't work, they needed to know that too. "I'll do it," he said. "Jake," Dr. Kelvin said, "this isn't like the other tests. If something goes wrong, we can't just repair the damage. But if something goes right, we'll have created the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. And if something goes wrong, we might not have a galaxy left." Admiral Roberts leaned back in his chair. "The test will take place in the Void Sector. It's a region of empty space, far from any inhabited systems. If the weapon malfunctions, the damage will be contained." "When do we start?" Jake asked. "Tomorrow. I've already ordered the transport ships to prepare. We'll take Project Phoenix to the test site and see what happens." After the meeting, Jake walked through the station's corridors. Word had already spread about the upcoming test. Aliens stopped to stare at him as he passed. Some looked excited. Others looked terrified. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Kelvin asked, catching up with him. "No," Jake said. "But that's what makes it interesting. This isn't a game, Jake. If Project Phoenix works the way we think it might, you could be holding the power to destroy worlds. And if it doesn't work, we'll know that too. Either way, we get an answer." They reached the secure storage bay where Project Phoenix was kept. The weapon was smaller than Jake had expected. It looked like a large rifle with extra power cells and a complex targeting system. "It doesn't look like much," he said. "The most dangerous things usually don't," Dr. Kelvin replied. "The weapon itself is just a focusing device. The real power comes from the quantum field generator." Jake read the specifications. Project Phoenix was designed to fire a beam that could punch through a planet's crust and reach the core. Once there, it would destabilize the planetary structure and cause the world to break apart. How do you test something like this? Very carefully. We start with small targets and work our way up. How small? Asteroids. Then small moons. Then uninhabited planets. Jake nodded. "And if it works at each level, then we'll know we've created the ultimate weapon. And if it doesn't work, then we'll know we need to go back to the drawing board." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the test. Every other weapon he had tested had been an improvement on existing technology. This was different. This was completely new. He got up and went to the observation deck. Through the large windows, he could see the stars. Somewhere out there was the Void Sector, where tomorrow he would test the most powerful weapon ever created. "Can't sleep either?" Dr. Kelvin's voice came from behind him. "Too excited," Jake said. "This is the biggest test I've ever done. It's the biggest test anyone has ever done. We're about to find out if we can crack planets." They stood together in silence, looking out at the stars. In a few hours, they would travel to empty space and test a weapon that could change the galaxy forever. "Are you worried?" Jake asked. "Terrified," Dr. Kelvin admitted, "but also curious. That's the problem with being a scientist. You always want to know what happens next, even if what happens next is dangerous. Especially if it's dangerous, the most important discoveries usually are." Jake thought about all the weapons he had tested. Each one had worked better than expected. Each one had pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Project Phoenix would push those boundaries further than anyone had ever gone before. What if Admiral Roberts is right? Jake asked. What if some things are too dangerous to test? Then we'll never know what we're capable of. And we'll never know what our enemies might be capable of either. Our enemies? There are hostile species out there, Jake. Groups that want to conquer other worlds. If they develop weapons like Project Phoenix first, we'll have no way to defend against them. Jake nodded. So we have to test it. We have to test it. The next morning came quickly. Jake woke up to find the station buzzing with activity. Ships were being prepared for the journey to the void sector. Scientists were loading equipment. Military personnel were checking security protocols. Admiral Roberts was waiting in the docking bay. "Are you ready, Lieutenant Morrison?" "As ready as I can be." Remember, this test will determine the future of human involvement in weapons research. Don't let your enthusiasm override your judgment. "I'll be careful." "No, you won't, but try to be smart about it." They boarded the transport ship along with Dr. Kelvin, Vextar, Grom, and a dozen other scientists. Project Phoenix was secured in a special container that required 3 different codes to open. The journey to the void sector took 6 hours. Jake spent the time studying the weapon specifications and running through the test procedures. Everything had to be perfect. They arrived. Jake was amazed by how empty space could be. There were no stars, no planets, no asteroids. Just darkness in every direction. "This is perfect," Dr. Kelvin said. "If something goes wrong, there's nothing here to be damaged." "Except us," Vextar pointed out. "The observation ships are positioned at a safe distance," Admiral Roberts said. "If the weapon performs beyond expectations, we can retreat quickly." Jake looked at Project Phoenix. In a few minutes, he would fire the most powerful weapon ever created. He would find out if humans had built something that could crack planets, or if they had built something that could crack reality itself. "Are you ready?" Dr. Kelvin asked. Jake picked up the weapon. It was heavier than it looked, but it felt solid and well built. The power indicator showed Gurr. "Find me a bigger target," Jake said. Dr. Kelvin checked her scanner. "There's a larger asteroid cluster about 100,000 kilometers away. The largest piece is about the size of a city block." "Perfect." Jake increased the power to 5% and fired again. The energy beam was brighter this time, visible as a thin line of white light. When it hit the asteroid cluster, all the rocks simply disappeared. Not destroyed or broken apart, but completely gone. "Where did they go?" Vextar asked. "According to the readings, they were converted directly into energy," Dr. Kelvin said. "Matter-to-energy conversion at 100% efficiency." "That's impossible," Admiral Roberts said. "No weapon can achieve perfect conversion." "Project Phoenix just did." Jake looked at the power setting. He was still at only 5% of the weapon's capacity. "What happens if I turn it up to 50%? "We don't know," Dr. Kelvin admitted. "At this rate of power increase, 50% might be able to destroy something the size of a moon." "Let's find out." "Wait," Admiral Roberts said. "We need to think about this carefully. You've already demonstrated that the weapon works. Perhaps we should stop here. But we don't know what it can really do yet." "That's exactly what I'm worried about." Jake looked around at the faces watching him. The aliens were terrified. Admiral Roberts was nervous. Even Dr. Kelvin looked concerned. "You built this weapon to crack planets," Jake said. "If we stop now, you'll never know if it can actually do that. And if it can do more than that?" "Admiral," Roberts asked. "Then we'll know that too." Dr. Kelvin checked her instruments. "There's a dead planet in this sector. No atmosphere, no life, completely uninhabited. It's about the size of Earth's moon." "How far away?" 5 million kilometers. Jake turned Project Phoenix's power up to 50%. The weapon began to hum with energy. Warning lights flashed on the control panel. "The quantum field generator is drawing power directly from space-time," Dr. Kelvin reported. "Energy levels are climbing beyond our measurement capabilities. All ships retreat to minimum safe distance." Admiral Roberts ordered over the communication system. Jake aimed at the coordinates Dr. Kelvin provided. Through the ship's telescope, He could see the dead planet. It was gray and cratered, spinning slowly in the darkness. "Ready?" he asked. "No," several people said at once. Jake fired. The energy beam that shot out was as bright as a star. It took several seconds to cross the distance to the planet. When it hit, the entire world flashed white for a moment. Then, it was gone. "The planet has been completely destroyed," Dr. Kelvin announced. "No debris, no fragments. It was converted entirely to energy. 50% power just eliminated a moon-sized planet," Admiral Roberts said quietly. "What's 100% power going to do?" Jake asked. "I don't want to find out, but I do." Jake started to turn the power setting higher, but Dr. Kelvin grabbed his arm. "Jake, wait. At this rate of increase, 100% might affect the entire star system. Or it might just destroy a bigger planet. Or it might tear a hole in space-time itself." Jake paused. That was a possibility he hadn't considered. "What do you mean?" "The weapon draws power from quantum fluctuations in the fabric of space. If it draws too much power, it might damage the fabric itself. What would that do?" "We don't." "No, it's never been tried before." Jake looked at the weapon in his hands. He had always pushed every weapon to its absolute limit. But this might be the first time that the absolute limit was more than the universe could handle. "Find me another target," he said. "Something bigger." "Jake," Dr. Kelvin protested. "I need to know what this thing can really do." Dr. Kelvin checked her scanner again. "There's a dead star about 20 million kilometers away. It burned out millions of years ago. It's just a cold, dark ball of matter now." "How big?" "About 10 times the mass of our sun." Jake set the power to 75%. The weapon's hum became a high-pitched whine. The quantum field generator started pulling so much energy from space that the ship's lights dimmed. "All ships retreat to maximum distance," Admiral Roberts ordered. "This is getting out of hand." "This is getting interesting," Jake corrected. He aimed at the dead star and fired. The energy beam was so bright that the ship's windows automatically darkened to prevent damage to anyone's eyes. The beam took almost a minute to reach its target. When it hit the dead star, something amazing happened. The star didn't just disappear. It collapsed inward, forming a perfect sphere of absolute darkness. Then it started glowing around the edges. "What is that?" Vextar asked. "It's a black hole," Dr. Kelvin said in amazement. "Project Phoenix just created a controlled black hole. The star's matter was compressed beyond its gravitational limit," Admiral Roberts added. "The weapon didn't just destroy the star. It turned it into a gravitational anomaly." Jake watched as matter from the surrounding space began spiraling into the new black hole, creating a bright accretion disk. "That's beautiful. That's terrifying," Admiral Roberts said. "You just created a permanent alteration to the structure of space-time." "And it's stable," Dr. Kelvin reported. "The black hole isn't expanding or destabilizing. It's behaving exactly like a natural black hole." Jake looked at the power setting. He was still at 75%. What happens at 100%? "I don't want to know," Admiral Roberts said firmly. "But what if we could make it even stronger?" "Stronger?" Admiral Roberts' voice cracked. "You just turned a star into a black hole, and you want to make it stronger?" "The weapon has a maximum setting of 100%, but the quantum field generator could theoretically draw unlimited power from space-time itself. You're talking about modifying the most dangerous weapon ever created to make it more dangerous? I'm talking about finding out what's possible." Dr. Kelvin was looking at her instruments with fascination and horror. "Jake, the readings show that the weapon could potentially draw enough power to affect the fundamental structure of reality." "What does that mean?" "It means you might be able to create weapons that could destroy not just planets or stars, but entire dimensions." Jake felt a thrill of excitement mixed with genuine fear. For the first time since he had started testing weapons, he was looking at something that might actually be too dangerous to test. "Maybe we should stop here," he said. The entire observation deck went silent. Admiral Roberts stared at him in shock. "Did you just say we should stop?" I said maybe. The human who has ignored every safety protocol ever written is suddenly concerned about going too far? Jake looked at the black hole, spinning in the distance. "I've never created anything permanent before. That thing will be there for billions of years. And at 100% power, you might create something that affects the entire galaxy." Dr. Kelvin said Jake turned the power setting back down to 0. "I think we've learned enough for today." "I can't believe it," Admiral Roberts said. The most reckless tester in the galaxy just showed restraint. "I'm not reckless," Jake protested. "I'm thorough. And we've thoroughly established that Project Phoenix works. We've established that it works too well." Dr. Kelvin was still taking readings. The weapon performed far beyond all theoretical limits. We'll need to completely redesign our understanding of what's possible. "And we'll need new safety protocols," Admiral Roberts added. "What kind of safety protocols do you write for a weapon that can create black holes?" Jake asked. "I have no idea." As they flew back to Nexus Station, Jake thought about what had happened. He had tested the ultimate weapon and found out that it was more ultimate than anyone had imagined. The galaxy now had access to technology that could reshape space and time itself. "What happens now?" he asked Dr. Kelvin. "Now you get promoted. The Galactic Council wants to offer you a position as Director of Extreme Weapons Development." "What does that mean?" "It means you'll be in charge of testing all the weapons that other people are too scared to test." Jake smiled. "And Admiral Roberts? He's retiring early. He says working with humans is too stressful for his health." "What about new projects?" Dr. Kelvin showed him a datapad with blueprints for something called Project Omega. "The theoretical physicists have some ideas about weapons that could affect parallel dimensions." "Parallel dimensions?" "Weapons that could theoretically destroy things that don't even exist in our reality yet." Jake looked at the blueprints. They were more complex than anything he had ever seen. "When do we start?" "As soon as the new testing facility is ready. We're building it in an empty galaxy about 50 million light years away." "An empty galaxy?" "After what happened today, everyone agreed that we need more room for testing." Jake laughed. "I've never had an entire galaxy to test weapons in before." "You've never had weapons like these before either." As Nexus Station came into view, Jake could see that it was busier than ever. Ships from every major species were docked there. Word of Project Phoenix's success had spread throughout the galaxy. "I bet they all want to know how to build their own planet crackers," Jake said. "They do, but they also want to make sure that only responsible people have access to them." "Responsible people like me?" Dr. Kelvin smiled. "Jake, you just turned down the chance to test a weapon at maximum power because you worried about the consequences. That might be the most responsible thing anyone has ever done. I'm learning." "Good, because Project Omega is going to make Project Phoenix look